get to go next for the next one.
I think half face. Is that what we're gonna
Yeah,
do?
but not for this one.
No, I meant.
Oh, you meant the third one.
All right, let's do it. Sound is rolling, Mike. I was watching a show that I absolutely love, but hadn't seen in a while recently, when I found myself a little bewildered by a segment. You see, it was supposed to be about consent in the gray, a topic that I find interesting and we will talk about tonight, but they kept using a term that, the use of which I just couldn't wrap my head around. It was non-consensual sex. What is that? I messaged my girlfriend who'd recommended the episode and asked her, why aren't they calling it what it is? Rape. It was like they were afraid to say the word, as though it were a scarlet stain with a stench that would repel viewers. I do think there is a gray area in sexual encounters, and I want us to talk about that, but know this. I will never invalidate the experiences of countless women and men by using the term non-consensual sex. Just like the term child prostitute is mute because it deleteriously mischaracterizes child rape and absolves predators and traffickers. Rape by any other name is still rape. And if we don't acknowledge it, if we pretend that what is black and white isn't, then we miss the opportunity to further move the real conversation forward about the gradations in between. There is a gray that exists, and it can lead to pain, but it can also lead to pleasure. So tonight, on Before We Wrap, we're going to talk about that. Consent in the gray. Are we gonna get both cameras with this? Action! That'll do. Wonderful. Wunderbar. Wunderbar. How you doing?
I'm all right. Bit nervous. I don't do like interviews. I'm just generally like a very shy person. I don't do this.
I'm so glad that you did this. I'm so glad that there's someone who looks like us who study this. I'm sure, you tell me, but I feel like often when you walk into a room, based on my experiences, I would feel like people wouldn't initially expect what you offer.
Yeah, no. Forensic psychology isn't a female-dominated field anyway.
Yeah.
And then psychology used to be a lot of old white guys.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
Freud was an old white guy, wasn't he?
Yes.
But I do find it a little bit frustrating just kind of navigating spaces as a Black woman. There feels like there's such a disrespect for our safety in a lot of ways, right? And to begin with, I kind of want us to get an idea. Can you just define for me, what is rape?
Rape at its core is a form of sexual violence when there is no consent involved in a sexual act. So that is rape. There's a difference in kind of rape and sexual assault. Sexual assault encompasses everything. So not just penetration. It could be kissing and touching and other things like that. So rape is typically about penetration of some orifice.
Yeah. But so in even just saying the word consent, I feel like we also need to break that down. Like, what is consent for people?
Is choice. It's linked to freedom, but also capacity to be able to make that choice. So if you are incapacitated for whatever reason, whether that is through some form of inebriation or mental capacity, that you can't technically give consent. So that's not consent. If anyone is confused, don't proceed. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. Yeah.
Right. I think that there are these ideas associated with like, oh, well, women they'll say no, but they mean yes. There's so many things that are attached to culture. What are some of the myths that you've seen that are kind of aligned with rape in general?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, when women say no, they mean yes. If you dress a particular way, then that means you want it, or women really want rape, but just don't know how to say it, or,
That one is so great to me. They really do want to be raped. They really do want their agency, taken away from them and their choices. No, yes.
Yeah, I've heard that far too many times in my life. But I mean, by nature of my work, I work with people who engage in a lot of offending behavior, and they will say they want it, they just don't know it yet. But on the other end, I think that doesn't get talked about as much when it comes to myths are the ones surrounding men. So only gay men commit rape. Rape only happens in prison if it's against men. A man can't be raped. These various things. I specifically think about Black men in these instances and how they are largely dehumanized already. But in terms of sexuality, they're viewed as these sexual savages.
Yeah, quite literally the image that's been portrayed in media over decades and decades.
Yeah.
My question is, how do we kind of get people to differentiate and recognize that these things are myths and not true? Because that's the confusing thing for a lot of people.
That's a really hard thing to do. We're socialized into these beliefs. They're everywhere. It's in media, in the movies we watch, in school. From the time that we are very young, we're learning these things. So they're going to feel like facts. So the only way really to combat that is through education. Being open about conversations around sexuality, around gender and gender discrimination.
What are some of the differences in those larger groups of people who perpetuate violence, sexual violence onto women?
Different researchers will divvy up sexual offenders in various ways.
Okay.
So the ones that harbor kind of the highest level of these beliefs are the opportunistic rapists. And typically it's the people that when the opportunity presents itself, they will rape. It's not planned. They are a very, very small percentage of the type of rapists, that are, if you were to group them into different types.
I'm so glad that you mentioned one of those myths, which is that most rapes are those kinds of like, she was running down the street and someone pulled her into an alley. No. The vast majority of rapes are actually by a trusted person or someone that someone knows.
Someone that you know, yeah. Somewhere very close to 90% of rapes are taking place between people that know each other,
Which is, again, like you said, the opposite of, one of these myths that we tend to believe. But I'm also interested in how rape myths play into that dynamic.
Yeah, and it'll differ per person. What comes to mind is this theory called the gatekeeper theory, which is, which you can say, I guess, applies when you think about marital rape. So as a woman, I keep the gate closed, the gate of consent. And then when I grant you consent, I open the gate, but the gate stays open. The gate stays open forever. This is the theory, and people act as though we are just in this constant state, like constant sexual state.
Right. It's so hard, the way that it's just stay around.
We're just ready at all times and willing at all times. And when you're in an intimate relationship, using that theory, basically you're saying that, well, I can have sex with my wife whenever I want. So that, that falls under this whole like patriarchal umbrella of sexism and everything. And it's these beliefs, these core beliefs that drive these behaviors that I'm going to take, what is mine.
But it's pervasive across a bunch of different areas. And I can see how that could come up just given our history and our legacy of what our bodies physically more than anything else meant as property to slave owners, to slave masters during that time. When we throw race into this, when we throw gender into this, how do these things now influence each other?
In terms of race, then you need to get into conversations about white supremacy and understand, again, coming back to this image of the savage, the sexual savage Black man.
Yeah.
And then the Black woman actually has an interesting duality when it comes to white supremacy and sexuality, because they're either the Jezebel.
Yes.
So you think about that gatekeeper theory, hypersexualized, or the mommy.
Yes.
This asexual, like mother type caregiver being, which is, there's no in between. We don't get that. We don't get that luxury and that privilege.
An interesting piece of research that I've read about is this idea of how young Black girls
Yeah.
start being sexualized as. Like they are as children, you know, people start to see them in that way as being much older. And so for Black women in particular, do we see any more of this kind of idea of vindictive rape?
Yeah, I think there will be more opportunistic. So just because by nature of being Black, I think that leaves us a bit more vulnerable because of the false beliefs around Blackness and being a female who is Black. And again, coming back to this idea of ownership and agency, in a lot of spaces, we're not given choice. So, you know, that then opens us up to a whole host of issues, you know, potentially being placed in all these abusive situations because we don't feel that we should stand up and we don't feel like we have much choice. Yeah.
I want to think about this idea of gray areas.
Oh, sorry.
I think that I've come to hear this term gray area so often. And it confuses me because I'm a black and white kind of person. I would just say that. My therapist has been working with me for years to try to understand the gray a little bit more. But in reality, is there a gray area that exists? Is there any kind of situation where there can be a thing such as a non-consensual sex act?
Well, if you ask me, no. And you are asking me, so no. Non-consensual sex doesn't exist. When it comes to consent, if you don't know, don't go, for lack of a better phrase.
It's really that simple.
Yeah. These things, these little things that, you know, I think people want to make it seem more complicated than it is. For example, when you say no and then when you say yes and then you say no, that's no. All right. People talk about being worried about ruining the moment and things like that. But at the end of the day, if you need consent, which you do for sex, request it.
I think that's such a powerful word that you just said. If you need consent, which you do for sex.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a society, we've taken on that myth that people do not need consent, explicit consent for sex. And at the end of the day, you need it.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, it's rape.
Yeah.
Dr. Larissa Johnson, thank you so much, forensic psychologist. We appreciate your coming on and thank you for being an advocate. Thank you for being someone who represents us and our issues by just simply existing and being yourself. Really appreciate your thoughts on this.
Thank you so much.
All right. Coming up, we've got shady shout-outs and music on the way. I remember when we met. I really wanted to impress you. I tried to anticipate your thoughts, your needs. I wanted you to like me. There were a lot of people vying for your attention, and I wanted to be the best. I was willing to put in the work, and for a while, I thought you did like me. I thought I did it. I just needed to maintain it. I could keep working this hard, but you didn't like me. You couldn't. You were a predator, I was your prey, and my esteem was your bait. When the time came, you made your move. It was implicit at first, until it wasn't. You let your desires be known boldly, as though they weren't criminal, as though I was crazy. I wasn't. But you earned this. This shady shout out to you, gaslighters, workplace predators, pedophiles, and others who abuse their power for personal gain. You're the fucking worst.
You make me better. You give me pleasure. I love you whether good or bad weather. Yeah, yeah. In the middle of a cold, I'll give you sweater. In the middle of a storm, take my umbrella, Ella, Ella. In the middle of a cold, I'll give you sweater. In the middle of a storm, take my umbrella. You're my call, yeah, yeah. You make me better. I never ever felt like this ever. No, hope we end never. Because in the middle of a cold, I give you my sweater. Yeah. In the middle of a storm, take my umbrella. Ella, Ella. In the middle of a cold, I'll give you sweater. Yeah. In the middle of a storm, take my umbrella. Raindrops fall, yeah. Yeah. In the middle of a cold, I'll give you sweater. In the middle of a storm, take my umbrella. Yeah. In the middle of a cold, I'll give you sweater. In the middle of a storm, take my umbrella. Raindrops fall, you're my when raindrops fall, you're my call. Down, you're my call. Ooh, yeah. Yeah. When the tears roll down your face, I'll be right there for you. When storms cloud no light, I will be your guide. And while we can't predict the weather, see, I'll be there through it all. And when raindrops fall, I'll be your call. When raindrops fall, when raindrops fall, yeah. When raindrops fall, darling. When raindrops fall, baby, you're my call. Yeah. Whenever you need me, babe, I'll come running. With no hesitation. No. No. When raindrops fall, You're my call. You make me better. Yeah. You give me pleasure. And I give my love. Said I give my love. Yeah. And I give my love to you. Said I give my love. And I give my love. I love you, whether good or bad, whether